The best of the best Hanna Barbera superhero shows that still feel amazing to watch. Disney has maintained its supremacy as the most influential animation studio for many decades, but a studio that managed to give a good fight for the crown is Hanna Barbera. Their iconic shows have influenced the pop culture landscape of America and formed a major part of the history of American TV regulation and the never-ending battle between creative artists and network executives. Today I bring you some of the most iconic Hanna-Barbera superhero shows that feel amazing to watch even today. I'm going to break down the shows decade by decade and tell you what the show was about, how it was made, and many other juicy details. Now, let's go!
Now to put out the fire!
The 1960s, the action boom. In the late 50s and early 60s, Hanna-Barbera dominated children's television with comedies like The Flintstones and Yogi Bear. The culture began to shift in the mid-60s, largely influenced by James Bond fever brought about by Dr. No, the peaking space race, and of course Batmania, a result of the 1966 live-action Batman series. There was an increased demand for action and Hanna-Barbera sent their best man, Alex Toth, on the job. A master of streamlined and sleek designs, Toth delivered some of the best animated shows of this era. Unfortunately, the rise in action led to a lot of parental watchdog groups who voiced their disapproval of the excessive violence in Saturday morning cartoons. By the end of the decade, most of the superhero shows of this era met their end because of these groups, and Hanna-Barbera was forced to pivot to mystery comedies like Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Let's take a look at these shows. Space Ghost. The pivot from funny animal comedies to action-centered animation shows was not easy for Hanna-Barbera. To make sure their ideas were top-notch, founder William Hanna and the lead of CBS daytime programming at the time, Fred Silverman, would participate in brainstorming sessions where they would throw out ideas and character descriptions, while Joseph Barbera and Alex Toth would convert them into rough sketches or doodles. During one of these sessions, Silverman thought of combining his love of superheroes, which was not at all rare at the time, with space travel, and the result was the first Hanna-Barbera super cartoon, Space Ghost. Space Ghost was a vigilante from the Ghost Planet who fought intergalactic villains with his teenage sidekicks Jan and Jace, and Blip, their pet monkey. Gary Owens voiced the hero who fought villains like the Creature King, an alien who controls intergalactic animals using a mind control helmet, Zorak, an insectoid villain from the planet Dokar, and Lizard Slavers, a group of reptilian humanoids that enslave humans. Space Ghost had all the cool gadgets, a belt that made him invisible, power bands that could emit powerful beams of energy, and the Phantom Cruiser, a sleek yellow spacecraft. The show was simple and effective. Throughout the first run of the show from 1966 to 1967, the creators did not explore his origins, and nobody bothered to ask about it either, as he kicked ass in space and that was all that mattered. As I told you all earlier, Space Ghost fell victim to the parental watchdog groups, but they had not seen the end of him yet. He would return in 1981 as a part of the Space Stars program block with more villains, and once more in 1994, hosting a talk show on Space Ghost Coast to Coast, which aired on Cartoon Network. The latter show was a brainchild of Cartoon Network programmer Mike Lazo, who was tasked with developing a cartoon that appealed to adults. It showed a retired Space Ghost, aka Thad Ghostal, interviewing real-life guests. The show is as bizarre as a show can get, as Space Ghost is shown to have no common sense, and his guests are often baffled by his questions. This eccentric and egocentric host's bandleader is Zorak, while his director-producer is Mightor, both of whom are forced to do his bidding as punishment for all the crimes they committed in the original show. Space Ghost Coast to Coast established him as a classic character and introduced him to many new viewers. Thanks to its popularity, the show saw many reruns and marathons on the Adult Swim block of Cartoon Network. Frankenstein Jr. and the Impossibles. Frankenstein Jr. and the Impossibles was a show that had 3 segments that acted as the middle ground between their traditional funnies and their latter action-heavy superhero stuff. It was directed by Hanna and Barbera and written by Eddie Brandt, Jack Hanrahan, Michael Maltese, and Phil Hahn. The first segment, Frankenstein Jr., was about the eponymous robot created by kid scientist Buzz Conroy. Buzz lives in Civic City with his dad, Professor Conroy, and fights villains with his heroic robot buddy, Frankie. Buzz could activate the robot using his energy ring. The show is a bit more serious than The Impossibles. The Impossibles got the lion's share of the show as Frankenstein Jr. played for one segment, while The Impossibles played for two. Frankenstein Jr.'s adventures were a bit more serious than the adventures of The Impossibles, which was more of a comedy show with zany and silly villains. Rock and roll superstars by day and superheroes by night, The Impossibles consist of Coil Man, or Coily, who has the power to convert his limbs into stretchable, coiled springs, Fluid Man, or Phooey, who can turn parts or all of his body into liquid, and Multi-Man, aka Multi, who can create as many duplicates of himself as he wants. They are given assignments by their leader, Big D, who speaks to them through a small TV receiver on Coily's guitar. Their rock stars' alter egos were modeled after popular rock and roll bands of the 60s, especially the Beatles. The episodes usually followed a format where the bizarre villains would pull off a perfect heist or caper while the lads are performing for their crazy fans on their futuristic bandstand, and they are called by Big D. Their bandstand could convert into a car, a jet, a speedboat, or a submarine, and off the boys would go with their cry, "Rally ho!" Filled with puns, The Impossibles would capture the criminals after some more funny shenanigans. A defining part of the show was the songs played by The Impossibles that are a riot fest to this day. She Couldn't Dance is my personal favorite. It is a mystery why parents thought this would encourage violence in kids. Birdman and the Galaxy Trio. Raymond Randall is an ordinary human who is turned extraordinary after the sun god Ra gives him the powers to shoot solar rays from his fists, fly with the help of his giant wings, and project solar shields to defend himself. He becomes the Birdman. After he gets his powers, he is recruited by a top-secret government agency called International Security to fight crime with his pet eagle, Avenger. Birdman's superpowers need constant recharging from the sun, or any source of light and heat, like a bulb. His contact at the Internation Security is Falcon 7, a mysterious man with an eye patch who gives him his missions. Later on, they gave a sidekick to Birdman called Bird Boy to attract more young viewers. This was not a popular decision, though, as many thought the character was annoying. Birdman's biggest threat is an organization called FEAR, but he also has to face off against an assortment of villains. This is just one segment of the show Birdman and the Galaxy Trio, another creation of cartoon legend Alex Toth. The second segment is, of course, the Galaxy Trio. The Galaxy Trio are Gravity Girl, Vapor Man, and Meteor Man, who patrol space as the Galactic Patrol Law Enforcement Agency in their cruiser, Condor 1. Their powers are not so easily discernible from their names. Don't worry, I've got you covered. Vapor Man could transform parts of his body into gaseous form. Meteor Man, who is from the planet Meteorus, could increase or decrease the size of any parts of his body, while Gravity Girl could bend the laws of gravity to her whim. Gravity Girl's father is the king of her planet Gravitas, but she left behind her luxurious and privileged life to fight crime in the Galactic Patrol. They get their missions from their chief. After the show fell to meet the demands of less violence on TV, the Galaxy Trio were done for good. Birdman, however, got a second chance as a guest star on Space Ghost Coast to Coast, where he was shown as an inept and unemployed man desperate for money. The success of Space Ghost Coast to Coast gave him his own show, Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, where Birdman, with his new name Harvey, worked as a defense attorney for classic Hanna Barbera characters like Fred Flintstone and Boo Boo Bear. The originality of the show is what attracted most early viewers to the show. It is a polarizing show, though, as some think it is a train wreck, while others believe it to be an underappreciated gem. Why don't you take a look at the show and let us know? The Herculoids. Alex Toth was on a roll in the 60s, and another one of his creations that emerged from the intersection of science fiction and fantasy is the Herculoids, which ran from 1967 to 1968. The show is set on Amzot, a distant planet where the barbarian family of Xandor, Terra, and their son Zorno fight to save their planet from invaders that range from mad scientists to super tech robots, with the help of their friends Egu, the rock ape, Gloop and Gleep, the shape-shifting protoplasmic creatures, Tundro the rhinoceros triceratops hybrid who can shoot explosive rocks from his horn, and Zoc, a laser dragon who can fly and shoot lasers from her eyes and tail. The show barely had any plot, but nobody complained. There would be invaders on Amzot, and Xandor and his forces would set out to kick them out. What more could a kid ask for on a Saturday morning? The Herculoids were created after the success of Star Trek, with clear instructions that they needed a space family that fights villains with a mandatory Chewbacca-like character. Those of you who have seen the show will have no problem identifying Egu as the Chewbacca stand-in. Though a no-brainer adventure show, the Herculoids was killing it in the ratings departments but had to be axed because of you-know-who. Though the show returned again in 1981 as a part of the Space Stars block, it was clear to fans that it was largely sanded down, an attempt to appeal to the parents rather than the kids. This is why the original show holds so much sway. It is not about morals, parents, or any social message. It is just about action and fun, a chance for kids to be kids without any worry.
The Fantastic Four.
The Fantastic Four. In 1966, Hanna Barbera agent Cy Fisher saw his son Stuart reading a Fantastic Four comic book with great interest. For the uninitiated, Fantastic Four follows the adventures of the superpowered family Mr. Fantastic, aka Reed Richards, his wife Invisible Girl or Susan Storm Richards, their friend The Thing or Benjamin J. Grimm, and Susan's brother Johnny Storm, aka Human Torch. The four got their superpowers when they were traveling in space and were bombarded by cosmic rays. Mr. Fantastic could stretch his body to fantastical lengths. Invisible Girl is pretty self-explanatory, she could turn invisible. The Thing had rock-hard skin, and the Human Torch could envelop himself in flames and fly. Fisher asked his son whether the Fantastic Four would make a good cartoon. His son excitedly said yes, and Fisher picked up the phone to advise Joseph Barbera to get the rights for Fantastic Four. Barbera read the comic himself and, having confirmed its potential as a good Saturday morning cartoon, contacted Stan Lee with Fisher. Thankfully, the rights were up for grabs and Hanna-Barbera and Marvel shook hands. It didn't take long for Hanna-Barbera to pitch it to ABC, who accepted the show, and by the fall of 1967 the show was on air. Hanna-Barbera and ABC retained the creators of the Fantastic Four, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, as consultants to make sure the show stayed faithful to the source material, and Alex Toth designed the characters with minute tweaks. Fun fact, one character to get a major makeover was the Silver Surfer, who was drawn so that it looked like he wore shorts, to please conservative parents who thought he was too naked for a kids show. This version of the Fantastic Four appeased comic book fans and new viewers alike, as it managed to capture the energy and excitement of superheroes with some added humor. It was especially a treat for comic lovers who got to see iconic characters like Doctor Doom, Mole Man, Uatu, and Galactus. The art direction closely matched the vibe of the comic books, and the small print on the title cards mentioned which comic issue they are adapting the episode from. If you watch it today, you might find the animation a bit outdated, as expected, but the voice acting and plot lines are evergreen and will leave you wanting more. Moby Dick and the Mighty Mightor. After the success of Space Ghost, Fred Silverman, the head of daytime programming at CBS, commissioned 3 action-adventure series from Hanna-Barbera for their 1967-68 fall schedule. These shows were The Herculoids, Shazzan, and Moby Dick and the Mighty Mightor. Moby Dick and Mighty Mightor followed the format of Frankenstein Jr. and The Impossibles, in that it was one segment of Moby Dick sandwiched between 2 segments of Mighty Mightor. During the Stone Age, teenage caveman Tor and his pet dinosaur Tog are on a hunting trip when they see an ancient hermit being attacked by an Allosaurus. They rescue him, and the grateful hermit gives Tor a magical club. If Tor raises the club to the sky, he is transformed into Mightor, a superhero with superhuman strength, the ability to fly, and the power to shoot energy blasts. The club transforms Tog into a fire-breathing dragon. With his newfound powers, Mightor protects his village from numerous foes. His family includes his father, Chief Pondo, his sister, Shira, and his brother, Little Rock, who loves to pretend to be Mightor. If you are a literature freak and are racking your brain wondering how Herman Melville's symbology-rich novel could be adapted for a kids' show, let me clear your worries. The only thing the show and Melville's novel have in common is the name. After orphaned teenage boys Tom and Tub get in a shipwreck and are attacked by man-eating sharks, a great white whale named Moby Dick jumps to their rescue. With their new friend and Scooby, their pet seal, the boys go on various adventures at sea. Both shows are unusual and entertaining, but might seem a bit repetitive as they follow the same episodic format. Mightor is completely formulaic. Somebody attacks the village, Mightor saves the day, the end. That gets old soon, but the action will keep you glued to your television set. Shazzan. Alright, I know I am being liberal with the definition of superheroes with this one, but Shazzan is a genie and has superpowers, so we are going to consider him one for this list. The show starts with siblings Chuck and Nancy stumbling upon a mysterious chest off the coast of Maine. Inside the chest, they find two halves of a ring that read Shazzan when they join them. The siblings join the two halves and read the word out loud. Suddenly, they are transported to the mystical world of Arabian Knights where they meet Shazzan, a genie. Shazzan greets his little masters and gives them gifts that include Kabubi the flying camel, a magic rope, and an invisibility cloak. Shazam's a jolly giant, growing so large that he can hold Kabubi, Chuck, and Nancy in his open palm. Unfortunately, he cannot return them to their home before they deliver the two halves of the ring to its owner, the Wizard of the Seventh Mountain. Along their journey to meet the Wizard of the Seventh Mountain, they meet a whole array of villains. The overall plot, however, never resolves, as that would end the show. The production quality of the show was top-notch, the art was exotic, the texture was impressive, and the backgrounds were vivid and dazzling. But despite that, Shazzan was not as successful as the other shows during that time. Thinking about the show recently, Silverman noted the problems with the show. He thought that it failed as the genie had no weaknesses, and that it was a second-generation show, which means that it was derived from another original idea. In this case, Arabian Knights. If you decide to rewatch Shazzan, I can assure you that you will love the art and the music of the show. Samson and Goliath. Created by Barbera and Hanna, Samson and Goliath was later titled Young Samson to avoid confusion with the Christian TV show Davy and Goliath. This was the only show by Dancer Fitzgerald Sample that was outsourced to Hanna Barbera, as the in-house studio of the agency, Gamma Production, had closed just before the series began. The show is about Samson and his pet dog Goliath. At first glance, Samson looks like just another teenager, riding around the country on his motorbike. When menacing villains stop him though, he slams his golden wristbands together and says, "Time for Samson power!" And he is transformed into the biblical Samson, and his dog is transformed into a lion. Their enemies include the Colossus of Thodes, a 100-foot-tall statue that is brought to life from a meteor shower, international terrorists. Another simple premise by Toth, Samson and Goliath steals hearts with its quality voice acting and visual richness. Watch it for the nostalgic factor. Arabian Knights, a mini-series that was a part of the Banana Splits Adventure Hour. Arabian Knights is inspired by the classic work Arabian Nights. This show has a more intricate plot than most of the shows during the decade. The show is set in Persia, once a peaceful country but now overrun by the evil forces of Bakar the Black Sultan. Bakar invaded Baghdad, the capital city, claimed the throne, and ordered Prince Turan, the rightful heir to the throne, to be killed. Turan, an agile acrobat and a master swordsman, flees with his magical scimitar that can be thrown like a boomerang. As he escapes, he is helped by Farik the magician, who used his magic to slip away from the guards. Farik just has to say the magic words Rozan Kobar, and he can cast extremely powerful spells. The two head to the stake of El Rabal to seek help from his uncle, the Caliph. On the way, they are chased by guards in the Caves of Doom, and they meet Rasim the Strong. Rasim is incredibly strong and attacks them, mistaking them for Bakar's men, but once he learns they are against Bakar, he befriends them and tells them that Bakar has already usurped El Rabal and captured the Caliph and his daughter, Princess Nita. The three then head to El Rabal on Rasim's long-eared donkey, Zazoom. Zazoom is not useless either, as he can smell gold and spin around so fast that he becomes a little tornado. In El Rabal, they rescue Princess Nita, who is a great addition to the group, as she is a master of disguise and voice mimicry. When they are cornered again by Bakar's men, Bex the Beast, who has shape-shifting powers, turns into an elephant and carries them all to safety. They collect themselves in the Caves of Doom and decide to form a heroic band to battle the tyranny of Bakar and his forces. They ally then and there and call themselves the Arabian Knights. A fun fact about this show is that many fans have speculated that Prince Turhan was a prototype for Fred Jones from Scooby-Doo. The show is a good blend of adventure and comedy. You can watch the show knowing that there is never gonna be a sad ending and the Arabian Knights will always win. Microventures. Microventures, true to its name, follows the micro-adventures of Professor Carter and his kids, Mike and Jill, who shrink themselves and their dune buggy using a micro-reducer to have the experience an insect would. Though it ran only for 4 episodes, this miniseries leaned more on the educational side than the action and adventure side. Their encounters with a bullfrog, a hawk, a Gila monster, a cat, and an Amazon ant are documented in the series. It features the iconic voice of Don Messick, who you might remember as the voice of Scooby-Doo as the Professor, Tommy Cook, and Patsy Garrett as Mike and Jill Carter, respectively. The 1970s, era of the Super Friends and comedic heroes. As new heroes began to grace the screen under Hanna-Barbera's supervision, stricter guidelines were set to make sure parental watchdog groups were happy. Superheroes concentrated more on saving people and solving mysteries rather than punching bad guys. To make the show more relatable to kids, they would add younger characters who did not have powers. Many parody cartoons were also released during this time, with Hanna-Barbera applying their classic comedy formula to the superhero genre. Though the increased censorship frustrated creators who felt they were limited by regulations, some shows managed to find their footing and do well. Super Friends. In 1973, Hanna-Barbera got the rights to a bunch of DC characters and decided to adapt Justice League of America comic books for ABC. The show was called Super Friends to avoid accusations of extreme patriotism, as the Vietnam War was still dragging on. Despite that, the heroes referred to themselves as the Justice League. The show consisted of Superman, Batman, Robin, Aquaman, and Wonder Woman. 3 more characters were introduced that were not previously seen in comic books. They were Wendy Harris and Marvin White, the powerless characters viewers were meant to identify with, and Wonder Dog, a really intelligent dog who could speak. Wendy and Marvin were superheroes in training and assisted the superheroes in times of trouble. The heroes would learn about emergencies through the massive Trouble Alert computer in the Hall of Justice and jump into action. They were sometimes helped by the U.S. Army official Colonel Wilcox, their government liaison. As I told you before, guidelines for children's television were pretty strict at the time, and the Super Friends had to suffice with watered-down violence. They would often persuade the villains to adopt non-violent and reasonable methods to get what they want. Most episodes featured environmental themes as well. The show was cancelled after just 16 episodes, though, as the network didn't think the lukewarm versions of the superheroes would do well. Though the network didn't know this at the time, Super Friends was making a place in the hearts of many young viewers. Hong Kong Phooey. Penrod Pooch, aka Penry, is a janitor who works in a police station. After reading the Hong Kong Book of Kung Fu, an instruction manual, he is convinced that he is an expert in martial arts. So he takes on the secret identity of Hong Kong Phooey, a crime-fighting superhero. Whenever Rosemary, the telephone operator, gets a call about a crime, she informs Sergeant Flint about it. Penry overhears the conversation and changes into his costume in a hidden room. He almost always gets stuck in the room and needs Spot, his cat, to free him. He then gets on the Phooey mobile, a vehicle that can convert into a plane, a boat, or a telephone booth depending on the situation. Though Penry means well, none of his successes is due to his expert fighting skills. It is either due to the smart cat Spot or some hilarious coincidence. This laugh-filled show was called Hong Kong Phooey, created by Hanna Barbera, who also wrote and composed the opening theme of the show. The show was originally meant to feature the popular Hanna-Barbera cartoon Huckleberry Hound as Hong Kong Phooey, but they decided to make it an original show. Hong Kong Phooey was full of Asian stereotypes, but hey, it was the 70s, and as long as it made people laugh, not many questions were asked. The show was a huge success, mostly due to the wacky physical humor and the voice acting of Scatman Crothers, who gave Penry a distinct voice. Crothers was one of the earliest African-American people to work in media, and Joseph Barbera later pointed out that many Southern local affiliates would have objected to the show and not picked it up if they knew Crothers was black. Though the show was short-lived and has only 16 episodes, Hong Kong Phooey is quite a popular character. You can see him featured in a lot of media like the game Might and Magic 2: Gates to Another World, the DC comic Black Lightning Hong Kong Phooey special, the movie Scoob, the TV series Laugh Olympics, and several children's books like Hong Kong Phooey and the Fire Engine Mystery, and Hong Kong Phooey and the Fortune Cookie Caper. Dynomutt, Dog Wonder. Dynomutt, Dog Wonder was a creation of Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, the same guys who created Scooby-Doo. He was a bumbling mechanical bulldog who went on a lot of adventures with his human, the Blue Falcon. The Blue Falcon is basically Batman if he were not so broody. When things are peaceful, Blue Falcon is Radley Crown, a millionaire socialite art dealer in Big City. But when the Falcon Flash alerts him, he changes into his superhero persona. Dynomutt is extremely clumsy, victimizing his master more than he helps him. This metallic dog can extend its limbs and neck and produce a huge variety of mechanical devices from its body. Dynomutt was voiced by Frank Welker, the prolific voice actor who has also voiced Fred Jones and Garfield, while Gary Owens, who voiced Space Ghost, voiced the Blue Falcon. The silly antics of Dynomutt have cemented him in history as a classic character, and the show is a case study in slapstick comedy. The show was woefully short-lived with only 20 episodes, and played during the Scooby-Doo Dynomutt Hour, and later in Scooby's All-Star Laugh Olympics. The all-new Super Friends Hour. ABC noticed a surge in interest in superhero programs after the success of Wonder Woman and the $6 Million Man. ABC also noted that the reruns of the Super Friends program were doing well and decided to revive it. Thus, the all-new Super Friends Hour was created. ABC and Hanna-Barbera decided to ramp up the action as much as they could in the new show, and that meant new sidekicks who were not powerless. Enter the Wonder Twins Zan and Jaina, who have shape-shifting powers that can be activated by touching their fists and saying the magic words. Wonder Twin powers, activate! Jaina had the power to turn into any animal she wanted to, while Zan could become water in any state. They were accompanied by their pet Gleek, a monkey-like alien from the planet of Exor, who was a genius and had a flexible and stretchable tail. To make Super Friends more culturally diverse, the Mexican superhero El Dorado, the Japanese superhero Samurai, and the Native American superhero Apache Chief were created by Alex Toth. They wanted to include DC character Black Lightning as well, but thanks to disputes between DC and Tony Isabella, the creator of the character, they could not obtain the rights for him. Toth put his genius to work again and created Black Vulcan as a replacement. Don't you just love comic drama? The show did better than the original Super Friends and attracted viewers of all ages with its colorful cast. The show ran for 15 episodes, but this would not be the last time viewers heard from the Super Friends. Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels. Leaning into their comedic talents, Joe Ruby and Ken Spears created Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels, a clear parody of Charlie's Angels. The show is about three girls, Brenda Chance, Dee Dee Sykes, and Taffy Dare, who find a prehistoric caveman called Captain Caveman and thaw him out. Captain Caveman, or Cavey, was apparently the world's first superhero and hides more stuff in his hair than Dora the Explorer does in her backpack. He can also fly and has superhuman strength. The girls go on numerous adventures together with Cavey. The brain of the group is Dee Dee Sykes, who has a strong resemblance to Valerie from Josie and the Pussycats. Taffy is the strategist and she has a crush on the captain, while Brenda is the scaredy cat who almost always ends up in situations where she needs to be rescued. The show ran from 1977 to 1980 for 20 total episodes, and is as cheesy as a 70s show can get. The art might seem a bit rushed, but the episodes are really fun and make up for it.
Challenge of the Super Friends.
Challenge of the Super Friends. Alex Toth had big plans for a new series of Super Friends. It was named Battle of the Super Friends, with the new member Captain Marvel, and they would be facing off against the dreaded League of Evil, headed by Captain Marvel's enemy, Dr. Sivana. These original plans were scrapped after Filmation produced The New Adventures of Batman and Shazzam, which used up the animation rights of characters like Butia Sivana, Dr. Sivana's daughter, the Joker, Mr. Atom, Catwoman, and Mr. Freeze. Toth's conceptual art also included Abracadabra, Poison Ivy, and Heatwave. Though the program had to be restructured, the central idea of Super Friends vs. Legion of Doom was retained. Super Friends would have Superman, Batman, Robin, Black Vulcan, Flash, Wonder Woman, Apache Chief, Aquaman, Samurai, Green Lantern, and Hawkman, while the Legion of Doom would have Lex Luthor, Solomon Grundy, Brainiac, Gorilla Grodd, Captain Cold, Bizarro, the Toyman, the Riddler, Sinestro, Scarecrow, Giganta, Black Manta, and Cheetah. The show, titled Challenge of the Super Friends, had two segments. The first would be the adventures of the heroes as seen in the previous two shows, while the second segment would concentrate on the Legion of Doom. Their headquarters, Hall of Doom, looked like Darth Vader's helmet, and in each episode they schemed to take down the Super Friends to conquer the world. With each new Super Friends series, the popularity of the characters only grew. The world's greatest Super Friends. For many fans of Super Friends, the world's greatest Super Friends is the cream of the crop. This rendition borrowed heavily from world politics, folklore, fairy tales, and classic literature. Some fun examples: the villain Kareem Azar from the episode Rub 3 Times for Disaster was based on Iranian religious leader Ayatollah Ruhollah Musav Khomeini. Literature inspirations included The Lord of the Rings, Arthurian legends, Frankenstein, and Alice in Wonderland. Legion of Doom was no more, and heroes fought individual villains or their temporary alliance. It is only 8 episodes and is worth the binge if you ever gone to bed dreaming about superheroes in your favorite novels. The Super Globetrotters. The Harlem Globetrotters started as just another basketball team. Soon they began incorporating comedic routines in their games and were known more for entertainment than sports. Their popularity gained the attention of Fred Silverman, who talked to Hanna Barbera about developing a cartoon show featuring the Harlem Globetrotters. Along with Andy Hayward, they developed a show where the basketball players were secretly superheroes who were given powers through an element called Globetron. They would change into their superhero alter egos by entering the magic portable lockers. They received assignments from the Crime Globe, a satellite that looks like a basketball. In the end, they would often resolve the conflict by inviting the superpowered villains to a basketball game. Each player had a unique superpower and was based on a real-life Harlem Globetrotter. Nate Branch, their leader or Liquid Man, had powers just like Fluid Man in The Impossibles. He was originally going to be named Fluid Man, as is evident from the big F on his costume, but the creators abandoned the idea to make him seem original. Freddie Curly Neal could suck his limbs into his head and bounce around like a ball, smashing his enemies. James Twiggy Sanders was Spaghetti Man, a replica of Coil Man from The Impossibles. Louis Dunbar, aka Sweet Low, who is currently the primary head coach of Harlem Globetrotters, was called Gizmo Man as he had an afro that gave him an unlimited supply of gadgets. Hubert Geese Osby could multiply himself and was called Multi-Man, exactly like Multi-Man from The Impossibles. The Super Globetrotters was one of the earliest cartoons to have a predominantly African-American cast. Though some remember this show fondly, others think this is a desperate and borderline racist attempt at making money off the popularity of the Harlem Globetrotters. The 1980s, Galactic Guardians and Saturday Morning Action. The 1980s saw the arrival of Ronald Reagan, who deregulated advertising for children. This basically meant that networks could now air 20-minute commercials for children under the guise of a show. I know that sounds bad, but this led to the creation of many toy-driven TV shows, like Transformers and He-Man. Hanna-Barbera used this deregulation to revamp the Super Friends. Unfortunately, this would be the last decade where Saturday morning cartoons were still a major part of a child's schedule. Super Friends. The 5th reincarnation of Super Friends included the original 5 and saw the return of Jaina, Zan, and Gleek. Instead of half-hour episodes, 7-minute shorts were created, and each episode was followed by a half-hour rerun of one of the old Super Friends episodes. Trouble began around the 2nd season when a writer's strike cut the season short. By the 3rd season, a syndication package of the previous Super Friends episodes was aired, and ABC did not want to compete with them. So, despite Hanna-Barbera producing 8 new episodes episodes for Season 3, they were not aired in America. The episodes would only see the light of day during reruns. I have no idea how kids during that time tolerated so many shows of Super Friends, but somehow they kept appreciating the new series. Many who hated the very first series saw a significant improvement in quality in this one and became ardent fans of the show. Space Stars. The anthology show Space Stars featured not 1 or 2 but 5 whole cartoon segments: Space Ghost, the Herculoids, Astro and the Space Mutts, Space Stars Finale, and Teen Force. The episodes were all super fun with many crossovers between the segments. Space Ghost returned with new villains and a makeover to his Phantom Cruiser. The Herculoids were now on a planet called Quasar, and it was explained that Amzot was the name of their country. A strange change they added was that Dorno called his parents Mom and Dad, whereas in the earlier show he used to call them by their names. Teen Force was about 3 students from an alternate universe from beyond Black Hole X. They were Kid Comet, who had superhero speed, Elektra with psionic abilities, and Moleculad, who had the power to control his molecular structure. They faced off against their enemy Uglor, a dictator from the planet Eurus, with some help from Plutum and Glax, aka the Astromites. Astro and the Space Mutts featured Astro, the dog from the Jetsons, going on an intergalactic adventure with fellow galactic cops Cosmo and Dipper, led by their human leader Space Ace. In the last segment, Space Stars Finale, Space Ghost, the Herculoids, Astro, the Space Mutts, and the Teen Force joined forces to battle the evil forces of the universe. You can tell that Hanna-Barbera is slowly fading from its superiority, as the shows do not have a lot of originality anymore. Most of the shows feel formulaic and reminiscent of their old shows like the Galaxy Trio and the Impossibles. My sight, however, is clouded by the fact that I can see all the shows released in the previous 2 to 3 decades. Children watching the show for the first time, though, ate it up. They loved the animation that was perfected from the original runs, and many have hailed it as the best of Hanna-Barbera. Super Friends, the legendary superpowers show. I am getting super tired of Super Friends, but clearly Hanna-Barbera isn't. They changed the format up just a tiny little bit, airing 2 11-minute segments per episode, which lasted for half an hour. This 8-episode show slowly began phasing out the Wonder Twins for Firestorm, as they believed an established DC superhero would attract teens more than the Wonder Twins. It was produced as a tie-in with Kenner's Superpowers Collection toy line. That was all for the legendary superpowers show, though, as the next season it would be renamed. The Superpowers Team, Galactic Guardians. The final hurrah of Super Friends came in the shape of the Superpowers Team, Galactic Guardians. Created by Carmine Infantino and E. Nelson Bridwell, the show received a modern and more serious makeover. Gone are the days of nostalgic charm and style, as the Superpowers Team now got into dramatic adventures with threatening and savage villains. This show matched the seriousness and tone of the DC Comics, providing young viewers with an emotional and often scary experience. It was a league above the usual kid-friendly Super Friends and concentrated on more space adventures. Galtar and the Golden Lance. As Conan the Barbarian and He-Man began to gain popularity, there was more demand for sword and sorcery shows. Hanna-Barbera's answer to this demand was Galtar and the Golden Lance, written by Neil Barbera. In a mythical planet, the evil tyrant Tormak usurps the throne and kills the royal family, only sparing the Princess Golita and her brother Zorn, who has the powers of mind control. He captures the sacred shield, which rightfully belongs to Golita and Zorn, and covets the Golden Lance, as the combination of the two gives the wielder unimaginable power. Golita and Zorn team up with Galtar, who has sworn vengeance against Tormak as he killed his family, and find the Golden Lance. The mystical lance usually looks like a short staff, but when Galtar holds it above his head, 2 mystical blades extend from the ends of the staff. The lance is enchanted, and it releases energy from its hilt whenever an unworthy man wields it. Together they plan to take down Tormak. We never know whether they were successful, as the show was cancelled before it ended. There were many admirers of the show, and why wouldn't there be? The show had top-notch animation, an intriguing plot, and interesting characters. If there's any show on this list that I wish had a revival, it's Galtar and the Golden Lance. The 90s, Cartoon Network era and the dawn of the new classics. By the beginning of the 90s, Hanna-Barbera was a fading giant, and Ted Turner, the head of Turner Entertainment Company, bought the massive library of Hanna-Barbera to launch Cartoon Network. In an intention to return the creative power to artists, Fred Siebert, president of Hanna-Barbera Cartoons, began the show What a Cartoon! The goal of the show was to let artists decide the kind of show they wanted to create, disregarding what the network executives or toy line producers wanted. wanted. It showcased shorts from budding new creators, and this led to a lot of exciting new shows. Soon after, Hanna-Barbera was completely absorbed into Cartoon Network, marking the end of an era.
We're being hit! Man, these guys are really...
The New Adventures of Captain Planet. Captain Planet and the Planeteers was created by Ted Turner and Barbara Pyle and focused on environmentalism. Though that might seem boring, the premise of the show was quite exciting. Gaia, the spirit of the Earth, takes one look at the planet and decides enough is enough. To curb the pollution and destruction of nature, she sends 5 magic rings to 5 special kids. She sends the Earth ring to Kwame from Africa, the Wind ring to Linka from the Soviet Union, the Heart ring to Ma-Ti from South America, the Water Ring to Guy from Asia, and the Fire Ring to Wheeler from North America. When they combine the 5 rings, they summon the greatest champion of Earth, Captain Planet. Captain Planet would fight the villains, who were all embodiments of types of human thinking that would lead to the destruction of nature. For instance, Hoggish Greedly, a pig-faced villain, is the embodiment of greed, while Duke Nukem represents misuse of nuclear energy. Barbara Pyle based each of the 5 Planeteers from real people she met. Guy was inspired by Chi Yok Ling, a Malaysian environmentalist. Ma-Ti from Oalino Paikan, the leader of the Kayapo people of Brazil. Kwame from the survivors of the Rhodesian Bush War. Wheeler from her father, and Linka from Petra Kelly, the co-founder of the German Green Party. The original series was produced by Turner Broadcasting System and DiC and already had 3 whole seasons. When Turner acquired Hanna-Barbera Cartoons, the show switched production companies and got the new title, The New Adventures of Captain Planet. The change proved to be good for the show as the animation quality increased and the episodes explored the history of each character with more depth. The show is known for the expert way in which it handled mature topics, from protection of nature, pollution, and overpopulation to serious social issues like AIDS pandemic, substance abuse, and addiction. No subject was too much for the Planeteers. Captain Planet is the kind of hero that is needed now more than ever as we inch closer towards our own destruction. SWAT Kats, the Radical Squadron. Mega Cat City's paramilitary law enforcement agency is called the Enforcers. The head of the Enforcers is Commander Farrell. One day, Jake Clawson and Chance Furlong were chasing the criminal mastermind Dark Cat when Farrell ordered them to fall back as he wanted the glory of capturing Dark Cat. The two refuse as they have a target lock on him, so Farrell clipped their jet's wing, causing them to crash into the Enforcer HQ. Farrell blames them for the destruction, dishonorably discharges them, and assigns them to the city's military salvage yard to pay for the damage. In the salvage yard, the two build high-tech weapons and vehicles from discarded parts and patrol the city as the SWAT Kats, defending the city from any trouble. They hide their identities in public and go by Razor and T-Bone. This is the crux of SWAT Kats, the Radical Squadron created by brothers Christian and Yvonne Tremblay. The show had a gripping storyline and awesome characters, so it was not a surprise when its ratings began to climb. It became the #1 syndicated animated show of 1994. Unfortunately, the CEO of TBS, Ted Turner, thought the show was too violent. This caused a delay in merchandising, and soon SWAT Kats, the Radical Squadron, was cancelled. To this day, the Tremblay brothers are working on a revival, but whether it will come to fruition, only time can tell. The Justice Friends. The Justice Friends was a parody superhero show that was shown in Dexter's Laboratory, created by Jendy Tartakovsky. The title is obviously a play on Super Friends, which was about the Justice League. There are many Justice Friends, but the main group consists of Major Glory, probably a parody of Captain America and Superman, Infrangible Krunk, who is definitely the Incredible Hulk. I mean, Hulk is green and wears purple shorts, while Krunk is purple and wears green shorts. And lastly, Valhallen, a play on Thor. I know this is not a show, but I wanted to mention it as I think it has great potential as a spin-off series. The Boys is a good superhero parody, but we deserve something lighthearted, don't you think?
The Powerpuff Girls were born using their ultra superpowers.
The Powerpuff Girls. Last but not least, we have the Powerpuff Girls. 3 kindergarten girls, Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup, created by Professor Utonium after he accidentally split Chemical X into a mixture of sugar, spice, and everything nice, saved the city over and over again. The show is an absolute delight as it strikes the perfect balance between the 3 girls dealing with age-appropriate problems like sibling rivalry, security blanket, and loose teeth, and whooping the villains like Mojo Jojo and him. Animator Craig McCracken planned to create an animated film short with a wrestler named El Fuego. In 1991, he drew 3 big-eyed girls inspired by Margaret Keane's art style to wish his brother a happy birthday. He liked how cute they looked and began to develop them in place of El Fuego. The resulting short was called Whoop-Ass Stew, the Whoop-Ass Girls in a Sticky Situation. When it was picked up by Cartoon Network for What a Cartoon Showcase, the title was changed to Powerpuff Girls, and what was a can of whoop-ass now became Chemical X. It was not picked up early as a test audience of 11-year-old boys did not think little girls could be heroes. Nevertheless, network executive Mike Lazo encouraged McCracken to create another short, and soon Cartoon Network greenlit the show. The Powerpuff Girls have received a lot of makeovers and revamps, but nothing beats the quiet charm of the original. It is a show that feels like a hug after a long day. Definitely a comfort watch. These were the best of Hanna Barbera superhero cartoons. What they lacked in originality, they made up for in smart writing, dedicated storytelling, and alluring art. Which one of these is your favorite? Nothing beats Powerpuff Girls for me, although Captain Planet comes close. Are you a Birdman fella, or do you prefer one of the millions of Super Friends? Let me know in the comments below, and if you liked the video, you know what to do. Tap on that thumbs up like your life depended on it. Before you leave, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and have rung that bell icon so that you always stay updated with our content. I will soon be back with more awesome stuff, but until then, goodbye!